So a communicable disease is a disease that you can pass from person to person. And here's the funny thing. I've taken all the key words that you need to learn. And that's not today. This is all the keywords you need to learn for everything to do with disease. And today we're not going to look at everything, we're going to look at some things. Okay? So here are our keywords. Just let me scrub these out. So we start off with a communicable disease. It's a really complicated looking word. It's really not that bad, but it looks it. What do we mean by a communicable disease? These are diseases you can spread from one person to another. There are actually two kinds of disease. One are communicable diseases, and others are non-communicable diseases. So I'm going to write these down. And as I said, this is a new language. And you've got to get used to the words that we use. So communicable diseases, let's go up here. Oh, and non-communicable disease. All right. So what do I mean by this? And what examples can I give you, young ones? Well, first of all, diseases that are communicable are diseases you can pass on to each other. So examples are when you get the cold, when you get flu. These are the diseases. These are communicable diseases, diseases you can pass on to each other. Non-communicable diseases, diseases you can't. And a really good example is heart disease. Okay. You cannot give someone heart disease. You can, if you've got cold, if you have a communicable disease and you sneeze on them, you can give them you can give them so you can give them a cold. You can pass on you can pass on flu or something. You can't give them heart disease. Okay, now, so that's the key word: communicable diseases. The thing is, as I've said before, when I ask you a question, you don't have to use. It'd be nice if you use the word communicable diseases. You've just got to understand what it means. We will use that word. So if I'm writing a test out, I would turn around and say, name one communicable disease. And, or then I could turn around and say, what do I mean by communicable disease? And you'll turn around and say, you can pass it from one person to another. All right. They're caused by pathogens. And pathogens is a key word. The things that we talk about when we talk about pathogens are bacteria, viruses, fungi, and protists. Don't worry about that. I'm going to go into them in some detail. Okay. So I was doing this with some students who were older than you. And I was doing it in some more detail. And I said, well, I'm going to start with viruses. And it was a really interesting conversation. And we start with viruses, and I zoomed out and I pulled on here, viruses. And I said something, and they didn't understand. They were like, what do you mean? And I said, well, viruses are the odd one out. They're the odd one out because, let me just shrink this down. They are the odd one out because they are not alive. And they're like, what do you mean? They're not alive. Viruses aren't living. So I'm going to ask you a question. I want everyone in the chat to tell me, right? Have you ever heard? I want hands up, right? I'm going to type it up and send it in the chat as well. Have you heard of Mrs. Gren? All right. Just put your hand up if you have heard of it. Alexa, you've heard of it? All right. Anybody else? Has anybody else heard of Mrs. Gren? All right. What I want you to do is now I want to change the question. If you haven't heard of Mrs. Gren, just put your hand up. I want to get a feel for how many. Put your hand up if you have not heard of Mrs. Gren. Oh, so there's quite a lot of you. Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk to you about Mrs. Gren. Mrs. Gren is something that you should have done in primary school. Some of you have. Okay, and I wrote it down here. All right. And it's how you class if something is alive or not. So M, and I've put what it stands for over here. I'm really shocked by this. I don't expect you guys. I expect maybe one or two of you. But, with all the students, I expect everybody to know what Mrs. Gren is. What we mean by Mrs. Gren is what are the things, what are the characteristics that allow us to classify something as alive? Okay? So everything that is living must have everything that's in Mrs. Gren. And what do I mean by that? M. Everything that is alive must move. Okay? Even trees move, they grow towards light. They must respire. Respire means, it doesn't mean breathing. It means using glucose or sugar, I'm going to say sugar, you're already young, as an energy source. I might do that in more detail at some point. They've got to be sensitive. In other words, I'm feeling a bit cold, I'm feeling a bit sick, and I've been feeling for a couple of days. And I will look for something warm. All right? That's sensitivity. We are sensitive to our environment. We all grow. All life grows. All life reproduces. All life excretes. All right? To give the technical word, as animals, as humans, we urinate and we defecate. Right? Every living creature excretes. Bacteria are single-celled organisms. Yeah, they don't excrete the way we do, but they do release carbon dioxide. And everything that is alive requires nutrition. We eat, plants photosynthesize, all life requires nutrition. Now, this is not true of viruses. Viruses do not respire. Viruses are not sensitive to the environment. They do not grow. They do not excrete. But the key one for me in all of this, the most important one, is they don't respire. All right? What they do is they reproduce by hijacking one of your cells. So if you've got a cell, a virus will take over, a virus will attach and go, right, I am taking over and you are going to make more copies of me. And this is your cell. And your cell starts filling full of little copies, little viruses, that this original virus has said, right, you're going to make more copies of me. Your cell makes lots and lots of copies, then your cell bursts and lets all these viruses out. That's why you feel sick. All right? So, let's go here. That's why you feel sick. And when we look at this, I've put all the information here. I've talked about card covers. I've talked about mind maps. I had a Year 8 student did a lovely mind map of this information. Now, this is about viruses. They are not cells. They are really small. They're the smallest thing that we actually do in biology in terms of a pathogen. They reproduce inside host cells. In here, you have genetic information. All right? It is that damage to the cells, as I said, when that cell bursts, that's what makes you feel sick. Okay? Once inside a cell, it makes thousands of copies of itself. And the kind of examples of disease you've got are measles, mumps, chickenpox, colds, are all caused by viruses. All right? Okay. Next, bacteria. They're the second smallest. To give you an idea, if I draw your cell like this, a virus is about this big, a bacteria is about this big. All right? They are what we call prokaryotes. And we looked at this very briefly at the start of cells. They do not have a nucleus. They do not have mitochondria. They have nothing inside. It's just like everything's floating around. Right? Now, they have a tail. We looked at one of my favorite organisms, Chlamydomonas, and it's a tail, and it's called a flagella. And this is where biology is different. There are so many new words. All right? They do not contain mitochondria. The thing that they do is they produce toxins, they produce poisons, and you've all had it. All right? Bacteria are the main cause for diarrhea in humans. So when you have a really bad tummy ache, that is caused by the toxins, they're not poisons per se, but they're not good for us. By the toxins produced by bacteria. They are alive, right? But they're very, very small. Now, you've got some names here. Lactobacillus, Staphylococcus. This is really important, but not for a few years. I can't really explain Staphylococcus to you till you're about year 10. But one that you may have heard of is Salmonella. You get this from not cooking chicken properly, and it gives you really, really bad diarrhea. Now, if you want to treat somebody, you give them an antibiotic. Antibiotics are medicines that are specific for bacteria. All right? And again, more words. Okay, we're now going to jump to fungi. I was writing athlete's foot. Okay, fungi are really cool. It is the most common fungi you will come across is yeast. All right. Yeast is what we use for bread making and the production of alcoholic drinks. And press P for pen. So yeast is an example of a single-celled fungus. You got others, toadstools, mushrooms that you buy and eat are the fruiting body of a fungus. All right. Now, I love this word, saprophytic nutrition. So I'm going to describe it to you. They literally vomit enzymes onto their food, onto the surrounding environment, digest it, and suck it up. It's literally what they do. They are saprophytes. They secrete, that means release enzymes to digest food, and then absorb it. Literally vomit their enzymes and then reabsorb it. Now, these tiny little things here are called hyphae. And you've all seen food go off. I bought a big box of oranges on Sunday, got them home, opened them up, and the bottom two were moldy. That's a fungus. And these tiny hairs are called hyphae. All right. The most common disease in humans caused by fungi is athlete's foot. If you go to the gym and, the probability is that you're going to pick up athlete's foot at some point. It's just an itchy foot. It's a fungi that is feeding off your dead skin. All right. The last one I really want to talk about are protists. It is a word that you're not used to. It is like us. It is a eukaryote. That means it's got a nucleus. It's got mitochondria. It's got all these different organelles, food vacuole, all these different structures inside them, like us. And it's a eukaryote. They are single-celled organisms. They can be parasitic. And I've got one inside me. I had malaria when I was a bit older than you. Malaria is the biggest killer on this planet. It has killed more people than every war combined. Right? They do not belong in any group. They are not animals, but they can be like animals. They are not plants, but they can be like plants. They're not fungi, but they can be like fungi. Malaria is the biggest killer, as I said. You need to know about this disease. We call this group of living things, this kingdom, we call it protists. And malaria is transmitted by mosquitoes, specifically only girls. Only female mosquitoes bite us. The reason being, most of the time, mosquitoes are nectarivores like butterflies. They just drink nectar. But when the female mosquito needs to make eggs, she needs a certain protein that she can only get from blood. When they bite us, inside their salivary glands sits malaria. And when they bite us, malaria pops into us and we get very, very, very sick. Now, these are the different things you're going to look at. So what we're going to do and what you're going to do is you're going to take each one. Now, I'm going to give you, let me get my teeth in. I'm going to give you a choice. You can do a card cover or you can do a mind map, but you must do some of them. So year 8, some people did mind maps and some amazing mind maps, as I've shown you. I'm going to show you again. So in Miro, you can click on mind maps. I've got mine here. You probably haven't. You can click on there, type in mind, then click on it. All right. And here's my mind map. You can pop your mind map down, zoom in, type in there, communicable diseases. Let me make that bigger. Communicable disease. Okay. Type that in, and I will start with bacteria, fungi. Oh, typing, fungi, protists, and virus, or viral, something like that. And then add to it. That's me. That is my choice. The only reason I'm saying that is my choice. That's what I learned to do when I was younger. We didn't know about card covers. You pick what works for you. All right. So you got 2 choices there. Your first job, and I've put it here. Create mind maps or card covers. That's the first thing you do. Learn them, all right? Everything there about viruses, bacteria, learn them. Once you've learned them, you've got 10 questions. These are multiple choice. Take your time, underline your keywords. I don't care who I've said it a million times. I don't care if you're fast. I care if you're right. And at the bottom here, there's some proper exam style questions. I want you to have a look at them. All right. Now, that's it. Let's stop sharing. Let's get you the link. And let's get it over here. There we go. Let's pin that. Elia, let's get your attendance over to you. There you go. All pinned. Let's work, year 7.